Hey, everybody. Welcome to 360 Executive Suites podcast. My guest today is Mr. Chip Meyer of The Chip. Before I get into some questions with Chip and let him tell us the history of his company and all the things he does and the people he serves, I want to thank Mr. Fred Arnold, who is our sponsor for these podcast episodes. Check out Fred's 4 state-of-the-art office complexes here in the Santa Clarita Valley. A great place to establish your business home away from home. Very collaborative environments in all 4 of his properties. We're podcasting here today from the location at 25101 The Old Road, right off the 5 freeway. Also in this building is Fred's brand new home center, where if you're going to be looking for a home, sell a home, buy a home, get information about the area, perfect place to come. It's a good clearinghouse of information. Chip, I know you've been in business for 40 plus years. Your company, The Chip, is involved with IT services. I know that's a very that's a very modest description of the things you do. I know you've been involved in this for a long time. So tell us a little bit about right now, what are the services you provide that most people that might be watching this would benefit from with your company, helping them out?
Sure. Our primary business is providing support services for companies so their internet services work for them, so their employees have secure access to email and Wi-Fi, and can come and go from the offices. A lot has been changing, especially during COVID. A lot more acceleration of people working, out of the office, and so we provide services for companies that do that, including this building and the other 360 Suites offices. And so we provide services to tenants here in the building, and then to other businesses where they just, you can't deal without internet and be in business. I can't even think of a business you could do. Even, if you're a farmer raising, crops, you still need the internet. So
right.
That's kind of what we do. We hook them up and keep them running.
I like that. One of the things I'm sure is an issue, an ongoing concern with people, whether it's just their personal, interactions in the world or business, even more stressful sometimes, is security, right? Security issues when it comes to, like, I think data changing hands, data being shared, things like that. Where are we on things that are, I periodically get something, and I can tell I'm getting these, fake emails or things that are trying to lure me into some scammy thing, right? What is there some overarching part of the industry that's in charge of establishing a security protocol for all things that are internet related, or are there different groups that are involved in it trying to provide that type of service?
No, there is no one group. I mean, there's several companies that are at the leadership of it just because they control most of the devices. Companies like Microsoft, for instance, and most of the security problems out there are trying to address flaws that Microsoft has that people have found out about and exploiting. But honestly, and you mentioned it, these days they're not hacking computers as much as they're hacking people. Almost all of the successful hacks weren't a computer breaking into some other computer. They were somebody who managed to social network into a position where they got access to a person, and that person gave up passwords accidentally or sometimes on purpose, thinking they were doing the right thing for some reason.
Right.
And sometimes it's just as simple as a bribe. So they're hacking people more than they are computers, because once you've got passwords, a lot of other things become quickly, available to you.
That makes sense, though, the personal hack versus industrial hack, because I think people, for example, in your business, companies that employ you to help them, you're vigilant about it all the time because there's a concern about it. I think you're right. The average citizen sometimes maybe not paying as much attention, or depending on the generation and what, it's so funny. My mom and my wife's mother are older. They're in their 80s. And they are very susceptible to, not so much my mom anymore, because we've kind of trained to tell her, and she's mastered the use of her, her smartphone and all that. But my wife's mom sometimes falls victim to that, I think, mentality that was prevalent when she was younger, which is if somebody calls and says, hey, you owe us money for this, it was a legitimate call maybe because it was the electric company or the water company or whatever. So she tends to be more intimidated by and scared by those kinds of things, which I think would make her susceptible if she had any internet presence at all, which she doesn't. to accidentally maybe giving away information, thinking she's complying with some legitimate request. So I'm wondering, is that kind of a big target audience, like maybe older generation people that have access to technology, but maybe they're not quite as aware or they're not quite as cynical about the, the dastardly intentions of people out there in the world?
Well, there's definitely some of that, but I think your biggest targets and the biggest problem for that would be the people that are just really busy. You got a stack full of emails, and you got to get through all of these in the next, hour. So it's fire and forget, fire and forget, fire and forget, and you're just trying to act on everything, and you don't stop to think sometimes because it just seems too automatic. And so you'll sometimes just, oh yeah, all right, fine, I'm going to go log into that site and check out what this email is that's so important that someone's sending me. And suddenly you were at a fake site and you gave up your password accidentally.
Right.
The other way it happens is when you've got organizations, and we do training on this kind of thing. It's making people mindful of it. But you've got organizations where an owner or an executive doesn't like to be bothered with things, and so his staff just knows, oh, I got to take care of this for him. I got to take care of this for him, and they don't go double check with him on something like. We had one happen in my company where the bookkeeper got an email that she legitimately thought was from one of the employees wanted to change his direct deposit. They had bought an email list from out there on the internet. You can just go buy emails list of owners of company, who their bookkeepers are, what their employees are, and then they use those to craft. That's what I said. It's social network hacking is what's going on. So they sent us an email to the bookkeeper saying, hey, I'm so-and-so, change my direct deposit from this bank to this bank. And she started to do it before. I was like, oh, wait, time out. Because those things are really hard to unwind once that's happened too.
So you caught it. You caught it mid.
Yeah, we caught it. We've had customers that do things like buy gift cards because they thought the boss had wanted them to buy gift cards and they didn't check with the boss. Wow. So yeah, those things happen. And so, yeah, that is part of the security. And then, better filtering too. Microsoft these days has changed the level of service when you've got email services from them. Used to be they would do the email filtering and stuff like that, kind of, I don't want to say free because you're paying for it, but it's part of what you're paying for email. Now you get one level of service that has filtering, and then you get, for a higher amount, you get another level of better service. And it's like, well, why don't you just, if I'm getting email, why don't you just give me what I'm paying for? But that's just the way that they've all been moving all the companies to this subscription-based solution.
Right. And I know you mentioned Microsoft. I was reading on your website that I'm going to say it this way. You guys are kind of a big deal with Microsoft, right? Like you guys are recognized as, is there some accreditation in the industry about, it seems like your company is very well held in high esteem by Microsoft. And I know you guys were named as like one of the top 100 companies doing the type of thing you do, which is a huge thing. So brag on yourself a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, yeah, we've been close to Microsoft for many, many years. I was one of the first certified network technicians when they started offering that program. This sort of been back in the 80s.
Okay.
Early on, late 80s, maybe early 90s, right in there. And, then my company got certified, and we've been very involved with other industry things. But, from that standpoint, to answer your question better, I think the thing that we're most known for that was Dodger Stadium. When the McCourts bought Dodger Stadium, they found me, brought me in, and I was in charge of the process to redo all of the internet throughout Dodger Stadium. And, before that project, that was when they put the lights all around.
Oh, yeah,
and they
right.
moved the infield seats in and stuff like that.
Right.
It's all off-season work. Before that, you had to pay cash for a Dodger dog because there was no credit cards because there was no internet. So that was my project.
Wow.
And we got that project because we had done Sands Expo and Convention Center and then Mandalay Bay after that. So, and some movie studios. So we did a lot of big building, campus level internet stuff back then. A lot of Wi-Fi stuff. We were early on. We had the first functioning Wi-Fi internet provider here in Santa Clarita in the industrial park. We rented some space on the roof of the studios out there and broadcast it out because you couldn't get high-speed internet
Right.
out there. That was before, AT&T was installing fiber down those streets, and
Right.
before Spectrum was offering it. We had that out there. So we did a lot of that type of stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then we focused more back into Santa Clarita and small businesses again, because those type of projects are huge, but they're few and far between. And I wanted it a little bit more reliable. I want to be closer to the customers and have longer term relationships.
Right. So, for example, using the Dodger Stadium thing as an example, is that when you went in to do that project, you sat down and said, we estimate it'll be a year or whatever the amount of time frame was to do it, and then when you're done with it, do they still though come back to you periodically to do updates? Is that kind of technology and infrastructure that you put in initially have to be updated at some point, right, to keep going?
Yeah, it varies customer to customer. Those size of projects, our job is to get in and get out. Part of what we do would be hiring new staff so that they could have permanent workers for them to do it. Because when you're those size organizations, you don't use outside companies like us. We get called in when it's a mess. And we go in, we clean it up, and we help hire and replace ourselves in effect. And
Okay.
it's usually 6 months. Dodgers had to be all done off season. You can't do that kind of project
Right.
during the season. You got like 6 months to do it, and then you're out of there.
Okay.
But for most of our customer base, it's we keep them as customers for years and years.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, no, that's great. And good for you for being the kind of company that's so good at what you do that you build up that customer loyalty and have those relationships, right? I mean, I remember, it's funny you mentioned before the industrial center had high-speed internet. I remember those discussions back then. It was a big thing about how to get that and all the efforts that were being made to try to bring that into the area. So that's great. What's the number one thing, Chip, that you get a call on mostly nowadays? What someone who's not already a customer, what are some of the initial calls that people call you for? They're having an issue or a problem, right? Is that typically the situation?
For new customers, it's usually because something broke and they're panicking, and someone gave them our number.
Okay.
Right? That's for a new customer. For existing customers, it's usually just the mundane stuff. I can't print. Something's wrong with that. I can't access the home office. Something happened to what they call the VPN. Those kind of questions,
Yeah.
and they're usually 10-minute to 30-minute fixes at the most. That kind of thing. We're also doing a lot more with phone systems. We put in actually the first VoIP phone system in Dodgers as part of that project. And we took some of the expertise we'd gained out of that, and we started doing VoIP phone systems, which are internet-based phones.
Yeah, right.
And at that point, then you cut the ties to AT&T, and you cut that $100 a month bill for one phone line, and you cut that more than half for 3-4 phone lines, or however many people you have, and it's just much easier to manage. So we're doing a lot more of that. In fact, I did 2 of them this week. Alone for small businesses.
And VoIP is voice over internet provider. Is that what
Yeah.
that stands for?
Voice over IP, yeah.
IP. So do people typically find that service to be just as good or not, or better maybe than what their landlines or traditional hardwired ones were?
These days, yes. In the early days, there was this curve because what was going on was all the traditional phone lines, they were all copper based. You had a pair of copper wires coming into the building, and you had a hard line between you and the telephone company. And those are pretty reliable. In an earthquake, you could still pick it up and it would still work, right? But there's no money maintaining those anymore. They're not spending any money maintaining them anymore. They're required still, as of right now, by law, to install those in any new building when they build a building or a house. But a lot of people don't even bother with them. How many people still actually have an old, hanging on the wall phone anymore, even in the house? They're usually just using their cell phone. So those things are there's no money being maintained. So the reliability on those have been dropping. Meanwhile, the internet reliability overall has been going up, and they have kind of crossed lately. Internet is generally a little teeny bit more reliable than the copper is. And the primary reason for that is internet, when it goes down, is only going down usually for a short amount of time. Copper might be down for a day or two until they can get a repair crew out there to figure out what's going on.
You're so correct. My wife's mom's house, she has, old school, and we have hardline connections at our house as well. She has been trying for probably 2 or 3 years to get them to fix her line, the old school line into the house.
Uh-huh.
It works most of the time, but when it rains,
rains.
it's out for 3 or 4 days. And
Yeah.
they basically said what you did, which is like, hey, they send a guy out, he looks around, he tries to fix it, but he's like, but to your point, like there's no longer the incentive, I guess, or the effort to maintain that, which I'm guessing is kind of on its way out technology, really, right?
There's no revenue for them
Yeah.
to maintain it, not to the extent that it would have to be. In cases like that, they used to replace the lines. They don't do that anymore simply because there's no money in it for them.
Right.
So yeah, we're doing a lot of those. And then you've got newer technologies coming out, like Starlink means we can do internet now, even in places where there's nothing available. We have some canyons up there where there's still no internet in the industrial park, in little areas where there isn't much. And so we do some microwave work off of the mountains, but now Starlink as well.
Wow.
And Starlink's reliability's gotten real good this year.
So how do you see, like, okay, you are massively knowledgeable and expertise in all the things we're talking about. What do you see as the next big challenge coming down the road for society, whether it's businesses or people just in their homes, needs, desires, potential problems that have to be like sort of envisioned and kind of, articulated, and then have solutions in place for those things? What is there some obvious thing rolling towards us that we're not aware of, those of us in the general public?
Well, it's been rolling towards us, and I think we have not yet got to a point where we're addressing it, but it's the massive flow of information. The fact that we've got in our phones, and we seem to be now constantly, no matter what, just always checking the phone. There's too much information coming out. AI, I think the biggest thing that AI is going to do for people in general use that's practical is to be able to filter more of that information down to just what really is necessary. I think AI is overall overhyped right now. All of the systems that are out there are basically really good at sounding convincingly correct about lying. And that's not a good skill. It's not a good skill at all. Elon's, I'm wearing an X hat, aren't I? Elon's new Grok AI is pretty good. It's pretty good. And there's one out there called Perplexity that's very good, because they're just using it the way I was describing. They're using it to where AI is going to query, find the information, check it, organize it, give it to you, and then give you back the links so you can double check what you want to check. What they call the large language model AIs that are out there right now won't do that. They can't give you sources, because the way they were trained, they're just mixing up all the words that they had learned into something that sounds reasonable.
Okay.
And that doesn't make it match any one website or any source of information. So sourcing back the accuracy of a piece of information you were given, I think, is where that challenge is. And I think that's going to be a much, much bigger thing next year. And we're past the election right now, so there's a little bit less focus on misinformation and all the politics of everything.
Right.
And we're going to come back to the practicality of, I got a job to do, right?
Right. Does AI play a role in security? Does it have a prominent place right now and or in the future in terms of security of data moving around all the time and stuff like that?
It does. It does at a higher level, frankly, than I operate at, simply because my customers are small businesses, and they're not dealing with that kind of data that way. I mean, you're mostly talking about really large corporations, the Amazons of the world, or government agencies that are trying to monitor who says what and whatever else out there. There's a lot of AI that's in play there, but whether or not that becomes valuable to them or more harm to the people it's trying to serve, I don't know.
Yeah.
I always watch and see how that stuff develops. I try to anticipate the trends. I think, for someone like Amazon, it's going to get much better at predicting what kind of products they should put up in front of you that you might be interested in buying.
Right.
Netflix has never been that good at picking out movies that I want, but YouTube does a pretty good job of giving me videos that I want to see.
Yeah.
I don't do Facebook or Instagram or some of those, or oh shoot, what's the Chinese one?
TikTok?
TikTok.
Right.
I don't do those.
Right.
So I don't know how well their algorithms work. But I do X, which used to be Twitter, and their algorithm's pretty good about giving you, stuff you're going to be interested in. That's where AI really is serving them well. And that's, those kind of tools can be applied to even small businesses, for things like recommending to customers, a good appointment time for them or following up with them. And making sure you don't drop a customer simply because you didn't email them back or call back fast enough for it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where those kind of tools will reach small businesses. But they have to have passed through the larger companies first, who will spend the money to do the development, find the skills, and then the companies, that are smaller companies will start adopting those and make services out of that to sell to other companies. That's where it becomes practical for everyone else. There's really good AI bots out there now that you can put onto your website that'll just answer questions for your customers. And they can take it just from, you give them copies of all your documentation and they'll read through your documentation. Now it knows how to give customers answers. Stuff like that's becoming very practical.
Yeah, that is. And back to your point from a second ago as well, the possibility of losing a customer if they perceive the fact that you didn't get back to them quick enough, having some kind of an automatic response that seems kind of personalized and, buys you a little more time to get back to them, over the phone yourself. But yeah, you're right. It is pretty impressive. Or even like these chats on, websites, if you're purchasing something and have a question and you just chat with the thing and it's able to, like you said, answer a lot of pertinent information about whatever your question happens to be, which is kind of cool. How about, I see in movies every now and again, and I don't know if it's a real thing, maybe it is, where in some, unknown destination, there's a whole big executive building, and inside there's people being paid to just hack and do nefarious things to people over the internet. Is that something that you think, are there things like that? Are there that sophisticated of theft and or, hacking rings that are that well financed, that are somewhere with all that kind of, resources behind them, is there enough money in that to where there is some quasi centralized effort in different places to do that kind of theft?
Oh yeah, but again, it's social hacking. You're going to find a couple of different types of them. They're first place, none of them are in the U.S. They need a lower cost labor to make it economically efficient. So you get a lot of them, like in Eastern Europe, sort of close to the Ukraine area and stuff like that, where they've got skills, some English skills, because you're going to be talking to Americans. You get a lot of them out of India. The Indian ones are particularly suspect because Americans were trained to have Indian call centers coming from American companies over the years.
Right.
And it's like, thank you for calling American Computers. My name is Boob. And we just got used to the fact that, that's normal. The same way you were talking about earlier, where your mom's, used to getting phone calls and she'll just pay it, right? So they have call centers that are just calling people up and, trying to sell them, computer service. Hey, we found a virus on your computer. And then what they're going to do is talk the person through the keystrokes necessary to help them hack into it. You also have a second type of like a call center where they'll literally just have hundreds and thousands of phones pinned up on a wall, all basically doing, Facebook bots and things like that. To again, they're trying to hack people. So it's a social media pressure or driving up ad revenues by fake clicks into something that they're getting paid to do, or find who they can get involved in a scam with, sending them money or something like that. And there's both kinds of those centers out there. They get pretty heavily targeted by, I guess the white hat hackers in the United States. There's a lot. If you go onto YouTube and go search for Indian hackers being attacked, and you'll find people that just are making a living now on YouTube hacking the hackers, and it's pretty entertaining if you're into tech stuff doing that, because they don't really have a ton of technical skills. When you do that, you're more designed to do some simple things, hacking a person. The The most common thing is they'll try to encrypt your hard drive and then sell you the password to your own data.
Right. I have heard a couple companies that have been, I'm using the term ransomware. I don't know if that's the right term for it.
That's the exact right term, yeah.
Where they have been, their information's been taken over, and then there's a say, hey, here's the price to get it back. And is it, again, is there honor among thieves at that point once they've stolen your stuff and they say, give us $500,000 back for it, and you give it back to them? Is there a guarantee somehow that that information is still not in their possession and it's back in yours only? Or is there a possibility they still retain possession of it and you're susceptible to another bribe/demand?
There's generally honor among thieves, because otherwise the answer everyone would be given, nah, it's too late. You can't get it. Don't give them the money. That said, there was a really, I'm going to call it funny, it was sad, incident where it wasn't a bank. But it was a big company. They got a ransomware hack, and they paid, I don't know, my phone, one of our phones was vibrating. Sorry. I didn't know it would vibrate. They paid the ransom, but they had to pay it through a Bitcoin broker.
Okay.
The Bitcoin broker that they paid it through stole their money.
Okay.
So it's like there was not honor all the way through the chain of thieves on that one. And when it got discovered it stole the money, the customer paid the ransom a second time because their data was that valuable, and it was less expensive to pay the ransom than to try to recover from it. Go back to what I do, for the majority of my business. Our number one thing is backing up customers' data, so that if something like that actually happens, we just go back to yesterday's backup if we have to.
Right.
We also put additional utilities to protect against things like ransomware that would detect, hey, there's a process in your computer busy encrypting files. That's a bad idea, right? That's, just shut that down before it happens. So we do both sides of that, but the backups are the number one thing. And backups become necessary. You could have, I don't know, you have a fire in the building and the computers are destroyed, or the sprinklers go on and the water destroys the computers, or you even have thefts sometimes. Someone breaks into an office and steals computers. And now with people more and more working from home, you get the home security issues as well, especially with laptops. We get about once a month some laptop for a customer was stolen because they were at the mall and the car got broken into. Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing. You want to make sure that A, the data is protected so they can't get at the data, and B, that you've got a very fast backup.
So you can set people up personally or business-wise to, in real time, constantly be backing up information off whatever their system is, right? It can be so that, to your point, if something were to go wrong, you go back to the most recent backup, whenever the cutoff point was, and you're able to have access to everything that was there prior to the machine being destroyed or stolen,
right,
or whatever it is. Is that something that once people set up a system like that with you, they don't have to really think much about it? It's all being done sort of remote somewhere? Like, is they're doing whatever they're doing, it's being backed up somewhere? Is that a cloud service type thing, or what is that?
It's generally a combination of cloud and local backups. You want both just because of speed and efficiency. But yeah, you don't want it so that someone has to think about it. I'll give you a personal example. I have a really nice, very expensive home laptop that I don't really take out of the home. Right, I got it. It was going to be my main work laptop, and it was so nice and it was expensive. I just decided, I'm going to use this here at home. And I grabbed my older one and I use that remote. And if I have to do something that really requires speed and a programming, whatever, I remote into that home laptop.
Okay.
Right. That means that the one I take to customer sites, I don't care if it gets stolen. I mean, I care, but it's not going to change my life. I care more about losing a phone, right, or a phone being stolen, than I would about that computer being stolen, because it's a larger impact for me to lose a phone than it is to lose that computer, because of the way the backup works and it's real-time data between all of them. And that's where you should be when you're doing stuff.
Yeah. So, Chip, as we're talking about this, and you've mentioned a couple of times, and I think you're exactly 100% right, that this social hacking that goes on nowadays, which is like a big target area. Do you feel like people in general, do you feel like because all of us now interact with, I'm using the term technology loosely, but we interact with technology like smartphones, laptops, computers, all the things we have in our lives nowadays that you have to have. We interact with it so much. Do you think now we accidentally let our guard down and we kind of are not as vigilant? Because part of it is, how do you, as a regular person, how do I be extra vigilant? In my mind, as we're talking, I think, well, smart thing would be to set up some kind of backup system with you so that I've got that service there to protect all my data and stuff in case it goes wrong. But do you think people just in general, that our attention span and our concerns about things in the world around us that might affect us badly has gone down because we're so preoccupied with our phones all the time and stuff like that? Or do you think people are smarter about it and more aware of it and more vigilant because we're always using technology all the time?
I think it's a combination of both. And a lot of it's event-driven, network news-driven in a way. We'll get customers after there's been some news story that are suddenly extra concerned about email security, or using public Wi-Fi, or something like that. When most of the time, if there's a problem, it is because they got into that fire and forget mode. They're not being vigilant on, a 15-second, discussion about, it could be something as simple as see an email saying, with the vendor invoice, and they just forward it to their bookkeeper and say, please check this out. Meaning, I don't know if this is good or not, but all they said was, please check it out. Bookkeeper gets it, comes from the owner of the company. Bookkeeper says, all right, I'll pay it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's where you want to be careful, and especially on the money stuff. We usually recommend to customers that any of those types of transactions require a voice-to-voice call. You have to talk to the person, say, are you sure you want to do this? You obviously can't do that in a normal billing situation for every invoice that passes through, but then every invoice that passes through doesn't go that path. It's got its normal path from its normal vendors.
Yeah, right. So it's almost like the backup to this incredibly evolved technology world we live in sometimes has to be like an old-fashioned checking with you to say, hey, Chip, I got this thing. Do you really want me to pay this? And you say, no, I didn't send that to you. It's obviously a fake thing, right? So yeah, that is hard to remind ourselves of, because you're right. We're so busy and people expect things so much quicker now. I'll give you a quick example. When I used to work at Universal Studios, I was a production coordinator on TV shows, right? And prior to any kind of, computer stuff or anything like that, people's expectation of when something would get done was what it was. Then the more you keep creeping in more technology and speed and the ability to do it faster, now there was more people that wanted information. They wanted it faster than before. And you're still only the same amount of people in the office doing it, but everybody got, and whether they needed the information or not, they just wanted to be on the distribution list for it and things like that. So I think human nature is to master technology, but then if you're not careful, it comes around and masters you at some point if you're not being super careful with it.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think that's the number one upcoming change, is how we filter information and process it. And I think that's one of the risks of AI, is we could start to depend on it to be accurate in a point where it's not ready to be that accurate. And so I'm not a real fan right now of the current state of the art of having AI try to filter out information to give me only what's going to be relevant out of it, because it could miss a whole lot or guess wrong or something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and you've got a good point there, one of the major flaws in most companies is they over CC each other on email flow, and that makes it really, really hard to get enough attention span from the person you want making decisions to your one thing that actually requires them to stop and think about it, because they got 100 other things that just passed by them that they really didn't need to think about, which meant they shouldn't have been on the email chain.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. I can't thank you enough for coming in. I mean, this information is so great, and you're such a pro at it that I'm sure there's times in your work where you just think to yourself, man, those guys are going to be in trouble because they're not taking the proper precautions, right? So it's great to have people like you, Chip, in the business, looking out for the companies that you work with. And what tell me, just so we know, what's the website for you guys? Is it?
It's thechip.com.
Thechip.com.
Yeah.
Super easy to remember. And I really appreciate you coming in today. Thank you. I hope you come back again, because I'm sure, like you said, things are always evolving, right? There's always new stuff. and we'd love to get updates from you if you're willing to come back again one of these
Sure,
times.
that'd be great. I'm having a good time.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on. And again, just as a reminder, we'll put a graphic up at the end of this that has contact info for Fred and his team in case you are in the market for a business home away from home at one of the 360 Executive Suites properties. It's a great place to be. Chip's here at this one, and I think he likes it here as well as all the other tenants that are here in the building as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.